So when I'm playing by myself, I just want to get just as beautiful sound as I can, just a beautiful warm sound, because I think um, that's that's the most important thing to me. Always has been.
Warning. This episode contains adult language and adult humor. Since when have trumpet players ever been considered adults? If you are easily offended by these types of conversations, consider switching to the oboe. Welcome to the Trumpet Gurus Hang podcast. I'm your host, Jose Johnson. My guest for this episode is Kevin Burns. Kevin Burns is a man of many talents. A Chief Master Sergeant in the U.S. Air Force, Kevin has held down the split lead chair in the Airmen of Note since 2002. But Kevin's contributions to the military don't stop there. He's also an award-winning photographer and the creative force behind the U.S. Air Force Band's media presence. Plus, he makes great margaritas. So, pour yourself a big glass, pull up a chair, and let the hang begin. All right, welcome to this episode of the Trumpet Gurus Hang, and I am joined by Chief Master Sergeant Kevin Burns. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, thanks. I appreciate you being extending the invitation to be on your show. This is a lot of fun.
Oh, well, absolutely, man. You know, we've met a few times. I've gone to a couple of the airmen gigs and got a chance to hang with you a little bit. And I've always been impressed with your playing. You have a tremendous sound. I mean, just a absolute gorgeous sound. And you're one of the few players who's actually almost as much of an upstream player as I am. So it's always nice to hear somebody play that's got that kind of set, because I want to see what it's all about. So, let's kind of jump into things. I mean, you've been in the Air Force for what, about 27 years now?
Over 27 years. This coming, about 27 and a half years. This last November is when I passed 27 years. And it's hard to believe that it went by that fast. It makes me the old guy in the band. It makes me almost the oldest guy in the entire United States Air Force band.
Wow.
So that's kind of a different feeling. And now I'm meeting people that come and win auditions for the United States Air Force band, for example, who were born after I got into the service. That's even super weirder. So it's like,
wow.
It's a unique place in my career to be, but I wouldn't change a thing, and I would do it all over again if I could.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting because a lot of people have, like anything, people have mixed emotions about, being the military band and things like that. But, I've heard from so many players that, that's kind of like their dream gig. It's like, I would love to get into a military band because, hey, you're getting paid and paid well to play music, especially if you're a jazz player. If you love playing big band, there really aren't that many touring big bands anymore. And the ability to play the kind of music that you love, to get paid, to have benefits, which if you're a road musician, you don't have those things. It sounds like the kind of the dream gig. So, I know everything has got its price that you have to pay, but, with 27 years, you obviously have loved it. What are the biggest things that you've gotten out of your time as a member of the Air Force?
Well, it matches my kind of sensibility perfectly in that I have always liked stability. So it always made me nervous, the prospect of being like a freelancer. In the back of my mind, I always thought, would that, could I do that? Could I move to a big town and make a living being a freelancer? And I think probably could, maybe in a different era, take me back 30 years ago or more, like when it was really the heyday. I could just like, I'd be comfortable in that zone when live music was all over the place. Sometimes I feel like I should have grown up been a pro in the 30s, 40s, and 50s instead of the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. So the stability was a huge draw for me. And it's interesting, when I first got a call from a friend about coming into an opening, unlike most people here in the DC Air Force Band, I I've been in a couple other Air Force bands. I actually started at the one in San Antonio, Texas, and that was from a call from a friend that I had played a lot with, and he said, "I don't know if you have any interest, but we have an opening down here." And so right at that time, I'd been playing a lot, but I had also kind of went for a backup plan, so to speak. I actually graduated with a master's in business administration, so I was ready to go the safe route, like that, like the whole sensible safety zone kind of thing that I'm kind of wired to do. And so right at the time, I was interviewing for like corporate bank loan officer jobs and this for my MBA. He called me, and so it was like, go play the trumpet. Probably not as good starting pay as this other job, these other corporate jobs, but you'd be having a lot of fun. You'd still be playing the trumpet. You'd still be working with musicians. So I went down there and auditioned, and lo and behold, it was a split lead position, and the lead trumpet player was Paul Stevens. And if you're a trumpet player, you know who Paul is. He went on to be the lead player for the Jazz Ambassadors, the Army Jazz Ambassadors, before he retired. I mean, just a crazy, sick lead trumpet player. Yeah. And I was like, this is really going to be fun. Like, just to be able to be in the presence and playing next to somebody like that. And the whole band was great. There were some extraordinary players. There was Fareed Barron on piano, who was the first piano player with Wynton's Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra. Like, there were some all-stars in this little band in San Antonio. So I was like, all right, I'm doing it. So me and my wife at the time, we went down to San Antonio. I joined the Air Force. And then after 3 years, I won a job at the Academy Band, playing lead for the Falconeers. So I was kind of following openings, so that job hadn't been open for 25 years. The lead player, you probably know the name, Chris Walters. He was their lead player for 25 years, just an incredible lead player. He just sounded like Doc Severinsen, just a huge, big, fat sound. So I took over for him. I was there for 5 years. Had a great time. It's a beautiful place, Colorado Springs and the Rocky Mountains. And then I got a chance to audition for an opening for the Airmen of Note. So I actually had 3 auditions in my Air Force career. So the timing came open with a note, and that spot hadn't been open for at least 15 years. Bruce Gates, a friend of mine, who was the split lead player. And so fortunately, I was able to win that audition and just get with one of the most incredible big bands in the world. And it's just, it's been a kick in the pants every day since. I've never gotten used to it. Just sitting down in the middle of that band, we count off a tune, and it's just like, just hold on for dear life. It's just an incredible experience, and I feel lucky every day that I've been able to do it. Now here in DC for going on 19 years.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to study with 2 guys that have been through the military band stuff. I spent probably about a good 4 years or so studying with John Bry, who was the split lead player with the Jazz Ambassadors, and I also had studied for maybe about a couple years with Von Nark, who was one of the former players with the Airmen. So I got to be kind of intimately introduced to the repertoire of those bands, and not only hearing the stories, but getting some insight into kind of the mindset that it takes to be in those bands, and in sometimes hearing stories about, well, yeah, this guy came in as a great player, but he just didn't have he wasn't cut out to be a military guy. He wasn't cut out to be in this kind of a band a little bit, so, it just wasn't a good fit. But it seems that when people were the good fits, that they just, they were lifers. They were there, because it was just such a good gig. So, you've mentioned a couple of times, the fact that you play split lead, and that I had never really heard that terminology that much until working with these guys. And so could you take a moment and explain to people what is a split lead player, And then also let's talk about some of the characteristics, like, how you define it. What do you consider to be your role in the band, and how do you fulfill those requirements?
Yeah, it's a great question, because it probably is kind of a position that you don't think about a lot. But I think the military bands, in particular, that I've played with, and all of the bands in DC, which happens to have, four of the top big bands around, and they're just it's an unusual city. DC is not hard to put together a big band.
Yeah.
If somebody wants to hire a big band, you can quickly put together one of the best big bands you've ever heard, because you got these full-time bands working out of DC for the different branches of the service, and and they all put their trumpet sections basically together in the same way. So because of the demands of the band, it's a very demanding band to be in. The charts are just crazy, off the grid, like anywhere from hard to just artistically complex, and it's just like going into a boxing match. You're just pounding your chops for a couple hours, like you've never had before. And so all the bands here in town, the big bands, they think in terms of the trumpets getting at least 2 lead players and 2 jazz players, because most of the lead players are like, if I had to carry the lead all night long, every night, every day, every rehearsal for this kind of big band, which is just a constant pounding of your chops, you would burn out pretty quickly. And there's really no need to. If you can attract the players, you can get a couple of great lead players in there, then you can kind of share the load. Now, in the Airmen of Note's instance, Brian McDonald is like the lead player's lead player. He's a phenomenal musician and an incredible technician on the horn. And he's, of course, our primary lead player. He's just got those kind of efficient chops. But he's also an incredibly nice, humble guy. The two of us, we're like, neither one of us care really if we play lead or not. We're just kind of happy to have each other. But there's so many charts written for Brian. My range goes up to about an A at the best, because I've really been more attracted to about getting that big sound as I can. And I've discovered over the years and talking with a lot of people, that the sound kind of going for the biggest sound kind of leads you towards slightly limited range, because you're just putting so much air into the horn. And so I understand about that by playing, and I was never really willing to risk lessening my sound to try to get a few more notes, because it just wasn't necessary. And then the hot second that I got in a band like the Airmen of Note, where Brian was just like a monster all the way up to like effortless double C's, I was just like, this is amazing. I'm so glad that I get to experience this kind of music with him, because all these great charts that are written to him. So when it comes to split lead, what that really means is that I'm there to take, as much as Brian wants to kind of take it easy, or to go towards different stylistic approaches. So I'll generally will play 35% of the lead parts, but sometimes I end up playing 75% of the lead parts. It just depends on how the show works out. But the charts that we kind of evolve to, that kind of play to our strengths, and that the music director will pick at any given night. And we're usually pretty good about like getting the first draft from the music director and saying, oh, like, this is nice, but you realize that like I'm playing most of the lead. Why don't we dig a couple charts out for me or Brian to try to just try to balance it, if at all possible. So that's kind of what split lead is. Like I'm there as a lead player, but it's I love being in the position of split lead, because it means I've always got Brian to be like the workhorse. And just being in Brian's presence and playing with him and when I put up videos of me and him, he makes me sound like I've got more range than I have. He's like, because we just kind of play off each other. But I can tell you one of the unique things about being in this band is that that not a lot of pros get to experience is the fact that me and Brian have been playing right next to each other for almost 19 years, like almost daily.
Yeah.
So there's a remarkable evolution that happens with that, and it's very unique to the permanent assignment military bands in DC, because that relationship is remarkable in terms of us evolving to really knowing exactly what's going to happen, no matter what we play.
Mm-hmm.
And our sounds really have evolved so much that even the music director doesn't know who's playing lead unless it goes above a certain note, right? So unless he hears that, oh, that's Brian. That's clearly Brian playing that. But just about any other chart we play, it always surprises me. The music director will usually like point to the wrong person. Hey, how do you want to phrase this thing? And I'll say, oh no, Brian's playing lead. Or he'll ask Brian, and Brian will say, oh no, Kevin's playing lead. Like, and we're right there in front of his face.
Right.
I've always enjoyed that fact because it's just a testament to that relationship and how we're kind of in each other's heads and in each other's sounds. I've even, we'll talk, I'm sure, equipment, but I've even evolved my equipment in the band to be a better match for Brian, to support his sound in the section. So that's I think that's one of the very unique things, if we're getting down to some of what makes being in a military band kind of different than even being like a top call player in a major city. Is that there's a relationship that happens daily.
Right.
That just evolves into a certain kind of atmosphere that I don't think you can recreate anywhere else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if you're sharing a lot of gigs with a lot of the same players in the town, it's still not as on that kind of consistent daily thing where you just like it's like you just learn to breathe together. It's like it's like your brothers. It's like you grew up together.
Yeah. Well, it's the difference between doing the sessions together and what you guys are doing. You're doing rehearsals together, you're doing the traveling together, you're doing the gigs together. So after 19 years, there's definitely has to be a level of connection that the average player doesn't get to experience. And if you've never heard the Airmen play, if you've never heard, especially that section with Brian and Kevin, you can listen to all kinds of great cuts. And if I'm not mistaken, they're all available for free at some in some.
Yeah, we're actually in the process. We're kind of in an in-between state right now. We used to have all of our recordings online on our website, and then we had to go through an adjustment where the legal read on the licensing and all that stuff, that we have to go through like a top level Air Force kind of legal read to get approval for that kind of stuff. And we had a realization that it was with the new online like social media and then the website accounts and stuff that the fine print hadn't really been vetted out.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got to dig into that and get that worked out. We're really ideally we're hoping to get, and we're working on this now with the legal office, is to get all of our material onto streaming services, which is the way to do it.
Yeah.
Because for years, of course, we would create CDs, a limited supply, and we would. Most of the time, if you had one, you were like at a Midwest or a gin conference where you came by a booth and picked one up. And then we started putting a lot of that online. But right now, there's not a whole lot of access to our stuff until we kind of work out those legal reads on it. But
Okay,
that is the goal.
Well, are you guys working at all during COVID, or have your public performances been completely shut down?
We are working, but we're not in front of live audiences. For the past year, we put out all video products, and we've done some very unique things. It's required us to kind of think outside the box. So one of my favorite things that we did over the last year is that we coordinated with uh, 7 other military big bands from around the world, and we put a big band together made of 2 or 3 members of each band from like Brazil, from Australia, from Finland, from England, um, from Japan, and we recorded this old classic tune, "I'll Be Seeing You," and which is also a vocal piece. And we had vocalists from each of the nations singing it. And back in the World War II, it had some special meaning because that was like the tune that became like an anthem for when on both sides, the people that were serving in the war and the loved ones back home, they wanted to, they gravitated towards the song because it was all about, "I'll be seeing you as soon as this is over. I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places." And it kind of worked actually very well for a COVID environment. We were suddenly all separated all around the world, and we're just waiting to get back to see you in the same old places. So that was a really amazing project. It took a lot of coordination to work with that many bands around the world. And then, so we've had that kind of project. We did actually a service song medley with all the other service bands here in DC. We've done a lot of unique outreach things. We're about to record. We're about to put out another piece with the Australian big band saxophone section and our saxophone section. So that's been some really fun outreach that we've done. So it's we've had to think outside the box, but we've kept playing in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But we've gotten millions of views online as a result of it. It's a pretty strong impact when you're forced to kind of think of something different and instead of just the same old thing. But we can't wait to get back out on the road. Can't wait to perform for local kind of audiences here. We got some great series in DC, and just getting back the band back together in like close proximity. We're all vaccinated. Everybody's feeling good about each other. We can get back. We can join in and play together. That's going to be an exciting time. It's starting to come back,
mm-hmm.
And we're watching that very closely. So I feel like we're not too far off from that. And so that's really nice.
Yeah. I have the distinct feeling that as restrictions lift, that we are going to see a resurgence in creativity, particularly in the music scene. We're going to see a resurgence of creativity that we haven't seen in recent history. Because there's so many people that they've just been so cooped up, and the energy's been building up, and I think that once the dam breaks, that there's going to be this explosion of tremendous music and excitement. So I'm ready for that to happen.
Yeah,
so,
okay, me too.
Yeah. So when we're talking about the split lead thing again, I've had this conversation with a few different people, people that are amazing, outstanding lead players in their own right. People like Dan Finero, people like Gary Grant, that are in situations where they're not always the top gun. So like Dan supports Wayne Bergeron. Gary supported Jerry Hay and Chuck Findlay for a number of years. And in talking to all of them, it's always been, certainly I get called to do lead stuff, but I actually feel kind of comfortable being in this position of where I'm a little, I have that responsibility to step forward when it's time for me to step forward, but I also have no problem stepping back when I have to step back. And I think sometimes the lead trumpet mentality can be, I'm the lead player. I'm always the lead player, and it's sometimes hard to step out of that role and to do that in a situation where it's, it could be song to song, where you could be bouncing back and forth between, being the lead player and being the second player. Do you find that to be a difficult thing, or did you find it to be a difficult thing? And how did you keep yourself in check to be able to do that and to be able to do that efficiently and effectively, to be able to switch your roles?
That's a great question because it's something that I've observed. This I think this relates to it. This is something that I've observed my entire career, and that is the higher quality musicians that I've personally worked with at every stage. And and that's been really the story of my life. It's just like having just really great opportunities just to go to this next step until I got to a place that I'm just really like excited about and never get used to like I'm in. But if I've had a major observance, it's that the higher quality musicians that I've had the opportunity to work with, the less ego exists. There's something about a like top shelf musician, in my experience. I'm sure not every person would have the same story, but in my experience, that's like when people are trying to get there, that's when the most ego comes out. Like, no, I got to be the guy. I got to do this. I have to do this. I have to try to own my space. The people that reach kind of the top shelf, they're like, there's like a quiet confidence. Like it's everybody knows their role. Like, for example, in a big band, it's a very it's a tip of the spear. That lead trumpet, especially in a complete ensemble writing. Lead trumpet obviously is tip of the spear. That's the lead line. And so, but there's a whole group of musicians that are world class that certainly owned the college that they were at, probably owned the town that they were in, owned most every place they were the guy. Everybody listened to them. In this situation with the Note, everybody just kind of lays that down, and it's one of the reasons why the Note is so tight and is so good is because they play the role. The lead trumpet player, when it's a full ensemble, he's listening really hard to Brian. The lead alto is listening really hard to Brian. The section players are listening in. Everybody's just doing this pyramid to where it's supposed to be. I have literally been in bands on lesser levels where I was a lead player and I would turn to the third player and I would say, can you please cut off here or this? And I would just get a no, because I feel like this is where it needs to be. Like that's a very odd thing to experience, that just kind of egos that won't let go of their space and what they think needs to happen.
Yeah.
But I think it relates to your question, because at a top shelf level, when everybody just assumes the roles, lets the ego go, and just rolls with what's supposed to happen, then you move very quickly through the music. The band sounds incredible because everybody's listening so tightly and intently. And maybe it's a personality thing, but I have never had a problem with that. Me and Brian, we're almost like, no, you play it. No, you play it. No, you play it. Like,
yeah.
And I've known some bands where like the lead player just wouldn't pass anything, or if there was another guy who could play lead and the chart was passed out, he was like the eyeball and like trying to vibe, like, can I play or whatever. Like that just has never happened between me and Brian. I think just because they're just both very easygoing personalities, and so that's been nice. When I was at the Academy Band and I got to know Chris Walters, he at his retirement ceremony, after being lead trumpet player for an incredibly renowned ensemble, the Falconeers, for like 25 years, he said something that I don't know why, but I will never forget it. This is one of the best lead players I've ever heard, and he said, "I've always thought of myself as a second lead trumpet player, as a second player. I just enjoy, being in the support role whenever I can." And that just like blew my mind. I was like, this is really an example of just like humility and workability in somebody who's got clearly the ability to do whatever he wants and always be the lead guy. But so I've been lucky in that respect. I've heard, stories, occasionally in other bands where you hear the egos come out. But I've been super lucky to be in a situation where, with the Airmen of Note, that it just doesn't happen. And so it's a real blessing. It's what has made the job so much fun in part,
Yeah. Yeah. I remember Vaughn telling me about things like that and saying, yeah, we kind of had this attitude of let's put the best guy on the job. And, he would say, even if it's like, okay, well, the song is going to end on a double A, but whoever's playing lead, that wasn't maybe his best note. He was maybe a little squirrely, but the third player had a really solid A. He's like, oh, okay, well, let's, you play that note because you're going to make the band sound better than, me trying to do it and maybe half-assing it. So, and I think it's interesting because I love sports. I definitely love sports, and I get so infuriated watching professional sports, not necessarily the games, but the world of sports, where people will leave a tremendously talented team so that they can be the man on an also ran team. It's like my personalities, I would much rather be, the 10th guy on the bench on a basketball team that's going to be, a dynasty than to be the number one guy on a team that's going to end up being last in the league.
Yeah.
You don't want to pad your stats. I want to be part of the best, and I want to play the role because everybody has a role to play. So, I think sometimes that especially in the trumpet world, and especially those players who consider themselves to be lead players, whether they truly are or not, that it's sometimes easy to develop that macho. I'm gonna take charge, and it's hard to let go of that at times. So, I think it's really a great skill to have for obviously on the bandstand, but just also in life to know that there are times when you need to step up and there's times when you need to step back. So, but I think
I've always wondered if because that is definitely true with the lead the trumpet. There's a reason why there's stereotypes for us, and I've always wondered which came first, the ego or the instrument. Does the instrument lead towards the ego, or does the ego naturally gravitate towards the instrument? I don't know. It's an interesting, but it is I think it is very true that those, and I found this out in talking to most every top pro in every city. One of the unique things about our job is that we tour all over the country, and eventually I've over the years I've gotten to meet just about every 3-4 guys that are the top players in every town.
right.
And in the big cities, Chicago, New York, LA, in where there's a lot of music, and down in like Orlando and Disney and Miami and stuff. I've also discovered that they're some of the nicest people you'll ever meet. Because that's part of the world to being successful at that level.
Yeah.
Is being somebody that other people want to work with.
Yeah.
And if you go in with just all cocky and like you think you're just going to overtake a town, you'll get shoved to the side of the road really quickly because nobody wants to work. I've had some really fascinating conversations with people like Malcolm McNabb and Wayne Bergeron and all the top guys about that environment.
Yeah.
And how some of these people have moved in and out of the scene, and not lasted just by the sheer annoying personality that they had. There's a definite correlation between just not only having the skill but just being very nice and workable and kind,
Yeah.
and a nice hang like what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Just hanging is the musician pastime. When you're not playing, it's fun to hang with your friends that you just played with.
Yeah.
It's a great name for your show because that's what musicians do.
Yeah, well, that's the whole idea. I've been fortunate enough to be able to hang with a lot of great players, and most of it's because I have a different approach, I guess, to life than a lot of people. I respect people for their skills and their abilities, but I also I have enough confidence in myself. I mean, there's no way I can get on the bandstand with you and Brian, but I have skills and abilities in other areas of my life that, I feel like there are very few people that can hang with me in that. But that's life. We all have our strengths and we all have our weaknesses, and because of that, I tend to treat people like people. So the starstruck portion kind of gets washed away, except for Jerry. Hey, Jerry intimidated me because I've been, I've idolized Jerry since, I was a teenager. But once I got past that initial thing of like, oh my God, it's Jerry Hay, then it's like, okay, well, he's just a dude. He's a dude that is a great arranger, one of the best horn arrangers to come along, period. Phenomenal trumpet player, but he's just a guy, and we can talk. So that's been a big part. And for me, and also I'm just stupid, and I'll just go up to people and start talking to them. I don't care. So it's the hang, and it's those times when you're sitting there after a gig, and you go to the restaurant, you go to the bar or whatever, and everybody's just sitting there, and you're talking trumpet, you're talking sports, you're talking politics, you're talking whatever, but you're just connecting with people because you already have established that base of a mutual love for trumpet. So that tears down some of the barriers, but not everybody gets that opportunity, and that's part of what I'm trying to do with this podcast, is to give people that opportunity to see what a hang is like, and but also try to educate, because that's a big part of things too. Because for me, that's been the big part of the hang, is listening to people and starting to understand their motivations. And when I'm a firm believer that it's less important of how you do things, like your technical approach, your exercises, whatever. I think it's more important to understand the whys people do things, their mindset. That's what drives the bus. So when you're hanging with people and you're talking casually, that's when you really start to find out who a person is, and that's really the cool stuff. So that's why I really love having you on this, because you've the few times that we have had these kind of casual hangs. You're a guy. Brian is a guy. So it's just always nice to do that. But I wanted to ask you a question about the audition process for military bands. Because like I said, a lot of people have. A lot of my friends I've talked to, it's like, oh, I really love to get into a military band, and how do you crack in, and what are the things that people are looking for. So for someone who's been in the band for as long as you have, and been involved in some of the processes, if someone is thinking about pursuing a career in a military band, what would be some of the key pieces of advice that you would give them in terms of preparation?
Great question. Not only have I been on the panels and audition committees for many auditions. Like I said, I've auditioned 3 times myself for Air Force bands, and I've experienced for a trumpet player, every type of audition that there is. And the reason why I say that is because the audition for the DC band is going to be different than the audition for a regional band. There's a number of bands around the country. Like I said, I started at the one in San Antonio. The Academy band is converting back to a permanent elevated rank position, what they call a premier band. So the difference in DC is that there are 184 people, roughly 180-ish people in the DC Air Force band. And every single chair in the band is a very specialized chair. And when you audition for that chair in the DC band, the bulk of your audition is for, if not the entire audition, is for what that exact specialty is. So for example, when I auditioned, it was for the split lead chair for the Airmen of Note. So my job was to play lead parts. I came in and they just grilled me for an hour on lead trumpet parts and segments, and just to see what I could do. See how I could play the charts, see how long my chops lasted. It was just a grueling audition. But that was going to be my job, playing lead trumpet parts for the Airmen of Note. They didn't put a symphonic piece in front of me. They didn't make me play a bunch of jazz changes. They didn't, make me play a Susan March or anything like that. My job was very specific. It would be the same for a trumpet spot in the concert band. It would be very symphonic oriented. They wouldn't be throwing a bunch of jazz charts, and they might throw some pop music because some of their most of their concerts have a little bit of commercial side music, but it's very specific. Now the difference between the DC band and like a regional band is that the regional bands, because they're much smaller, that you're going to be doing a lot more variety of music. So the audition for a regional band is going to be a lot broader. Now there'll be some specific. They might be saying, well, what this is a trumpet spot, but it really is going to be what we really need is a strong principal player for the concert band. And when he's not playing a concert band, he's going to be playing in a brass quintet. So we really need a good classical guy. They also might be saying, we have an audition, but we really need kind of a lead player or a jazz player. So, and when he'll be playing in the concert band, but when he's not playing in the concert band, he'll be playing in the jazz or jazz combo or something like this. And then everybody will be doing ceremonial music. So you're gonna get like kind of an even taste of everything. They're gonna be in the regional bands. They're gonna be throwing some marches in front of you. They're going to be throwing some like traditional classical trumpet repertoire, symphonic music, maybe an etude from either, could be Arvin or any of the classics. And then depending on how it veers from there, you may either go more symphonic or you might go towards the jazz for the commercial side. But like I said, in the DC band, it's going to be a very specific chair that you're performing in, because you can sit in that chair anywhere from 20 to 30 years. Like there have been people that have sat in the same seat for 30 years. Mm-hmm. A lot of people easily 20 years, because 20 has been the traditional cutoff point for when you can retire if you want. So that's the difference. It's a very specific. Of course, at DC, it's an incredibly high level. It's very competitive for that one specific chair, that one specific zone of what your specialty is. So my auditions were very different. My first audition for the Air Force was a very general. Of course they put me in the big band. They wanted to hear my lead chops, but then they pulled me out and they wanted to hear some etudes and classical stuff. And they wanted to make sure that I could do that. They wanted to make sure I could play some nice soft stuff that I had, that just had good trumpet mechanics, that I was just a good technical player. I could do a little this and that. And it was kind of the similar thing when I won the audition for the Falconeers. It was a really great jazz band, but I was still going to be playing in the concert. And then I was going to be doing a lot of parades out at the academy and stuff like that. So I did the whole thing. So my Airmen of Note, suddenly when I auditioned for them, that was a completely different style. It was very narrow. It was just 1 hour of blasting big band music. So it depends on where you're headed, and where you're headed really depends on where are the openings. And if my ultimate advice to anybody, because I went this route, not unknowingly went this route. Because I didn't come in thinking, I want to end up in DC. I just come in thinking, I want to play trumpet. Right. I just wanted to play trumpet, and there's some great musicians here, and this sounds fun. So I'll do it. If I like it, I'll stay. If not, I'll move on to something else with my backup plan. But my advice to anybody that is interested in the military bands is don't get too focused on one spot. Like, no, I have to be in this spot, because you could be waiting for many years for that spot to open. So look around, look at the whole canvas of like the Air Force bands and all the openings, and then jump on something that's open, and then you keep looking around until something pops up. The one thing that I did miss by not being in the regional bands, which I would have loved to experience, is getting overseas. There's a couple of bands overseas. There's a band in Germany and there's a band in Japan. And people that go over there, they absolutely love it. I watch the tours that they do, now, through Facebook, and just they just get to see all of Europe or all of the Southeast Asia and just have an incredible experience internationally. That's something I won't get to have experienced because I was I'm in a permanent assignment. I can't go anywhere. There's a lot of benefits to that, but that's the one thing that I would have always missed. But that is a benefit of the regional bands. You can volunteer for those kind of assignments, and generally end up with some really amazing experiences internationally. So I would recommend it to anybody to just jump on any opening that you see. If you're interested in getting to the military, and of course the other services are great as well. They all have their own flavor and personalities, but I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah, that sounds great. I was surprised when I ran across this little tidbit that you were responsible for building the social media platform or look for the Air Force bands. So how about telling us a little bit about that adventure?
Yeah. I appreciate you bringing that up, because I tell you, when I'm in 20, 30 years, when I'm just like barely creaking around and I talk to somebody that's in the band, before I even tell them I'm a trumpet player, I'm going to probably say, yeah, I was the guy that turned on all your social media. Like I was that guy.
For better or worse.
I literally did. I was, it's part of my story that I think is unique. The Airmen of Note we just passed our 70th birthday, and there's every era has just a unique flavor to it, with the different leaders through the decades, and what made them strong and what gave them reputation. And some of the all-stars that were in every era that you can go through the years. If there's one thing that I can say that nobody else did is took the Airmen of Note into the 21st century and the United States Air Force Band as a whole, for that matter, with social media.
Yeah.
So that's probably why. I mean, that is absolutely why. If anybody knows, my name, Brian, some of the characters in our band right now, obviously in this day and age, it's because of social media. It's because I turned on our page in late 2008 when I first became aware of Facebook and kind of like what this is, and I was like, I did it on my own. I did it I didn't ask anybody. I didn't ask if it was okay. I just did it. I just created a page because I knew it would be a really good match for exposure.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, saying that it amplifies our mission. It amplifies what we do. And what we do is intended to just reach as many people as possible. Because we are a public affairs organization. That is the primary mission for the Air Force band, any military band. We're not arts organizations per se. We don't exist just to make great art. We exist to connect with the American people on behalf of the United States Air Force. And we do that through the tool of music. And so we're not like a symphony that would be happy to get the same 2,500 people every time, just in a subscription service, and just keep coming back. We're trying to get a very broad audience. We'd be happy if we had a different audience every time, because it is our intention to reach the American people on behalf of the United States Air Force. And so that we've always done that very effectively. And social media, I immediately identified that this is kind of magical for an organization that has so much great content, every day, just great content. And so this allowed us to share things beyond the stage, because I just in a personal experience, I knew that just walking around the building on any given day, I could open up a door to the Air Force strings. I could open up a door to the concert band and just hear this glorious music coming out. And they were just rehearsing. I'm like everybody should be experiencing this. This is amazing. But nobody's going to hear this until they get on stage. And somehow I connected the dots that social media could let me like just throw a camera in here for a few seconds and just share this little moment.
Right.
And so I turned on all the pages when the only followers were me. It's kind of funny to think about because now in total there's over 250,000 followers, and between all the pages and some of our products, like last summer, the singers put out a product uh, that had 55 million views. I mean,
Wow.
there's some products that get out there that we put out there that are in the tens of millions of views that are just like, that's amazing. And so, and I'm the one that is given. So I manage all of that with it's part of, I manage the whole marketing and outreach office in addition to playing with a note. So I'm in charge of getting advertising for people to come to our live concerts. I'm in charge of maintaining our website. I'm in charge of all of our social media. I'm in charge of our broadcast media outreach. Getting, as I like to say, getting butts in seats, and then the butts in reach. The people that aren't going to come to the concert, let me give them some great content to digest online. And that's been an evolution over the last 11, 12 years now since I started it. So I'm proud of that piece of it because it lets me take advantage of all of my other side passions
Right.
that I discovered other than just playing. I have kind of nerded out on like photography, photo editing, graphic design, writing, and all this stuff that put it together and makes for nice the ability to create social media content.
Right.
And so that's been a really nice piece of my career that I think I would be happy if I continued to do that in some manner after I retire. I think I've got the experience and the kind of sensibility for it that it would be I would enjoy it if I just ended up doing that kind of on a corporate level.
Yeah, well, I think the Trumpet Gurus Hang actually need someone in our marketing department, so we may have to talk about that at some point as I reach for global dominance. So, but yeah, it's interesting. I've seen some of your photography. It's really cool stuff. I really like what you're doing. And like you said, yeah, everything is kind of coming together. It's coalescing your different passions, and I think that sometimes it's easy to get so trapped into a singular way of expressing our artistic nature. And we're multifaceted beings, and that I think it behooves us to find new and different ways to express the core of who we are as a creative individual. It doesn't mean you have to do it for a living, but to be a musician and then also to do something with graphic design, or to do something with writing, or to do something else that helps you to understand different ways of approaching your music. I think for me, my martial arts training was a big part of my music. Because as I began to understand how my body can move through space and intention and dynamic movement, then that suddenly became part of how I approach my playing. And I feel like I made more progress as a player as I made more progress as a martial artist, because it kind of helped me to express myself in a different way. So, I certainly, I admire anybody who can do photography. I love looking at good photography. I'm a hack photographer. But using your eye, do you see how using your eye for composition, do you rely on any kind of parallels in terms of using your ear for composition, in terms of like writing or playing, what you're looking for in terms of shape, dynamics, flow, or is it just a completely different process for you?
That's an interesting question. I don't know if anyone's asked me quite that manner. What I've always thought about visual acuity and kind of the visual talent is that it is very, it's like anything. It's like a musical talent. It's like drawing. It's like whatever, if you're good with math, whatever if you have a gift. I think it's kind of just a gift that you can explore. Because I have known, I don't necessarily, I can certainly go down the road of kind of relating what it would, the comparisons between, good composition and good phrasing in music. However, I've known a lot of musicians that couldn't take a good picture to save their life. You know, so it's not necessarily just because you're a musician you have the creative edge to do photography or art or something like that. You might have some other skill that I have that's completely off of my grid. But I can tell instantly if someone has just a basic nature for composition and framing visually by looking at their Facebook page. Even just the way they take a cell phone picture. I'm like, oh, this person gets it. This if I were needing a photographer, I'd be fine asking, because they just have a sense of like just framing. I always give the example. I've actually had some remarkable experiences with the Air Force, actually just as a photographer. I've been sent out on so many jobs as a photographer. I got to go one time with our rock band to a playoff NFL game. It was with the New York Giants and the NFL and the New England Patriots at MetLife Stadium. It was a playoff game. It was packed out. There were over 80,000 people there, and our rock band played the entire half shift. And I got to be the photographer out on the field in the 50-yard line in the middle of this giant crowd and just going crazy with the photos and stuff. And they still use those photos to this day. But I didn't have my trouble with me. That was how far photography took me to be able to have an amazing experience like that. And I got to spend the rest of the game on the sidelines, like 15 feet from the all-star players when they were on the sideline. This kind of thing. It was extraordinary. But I say that because I've actually given photography kind of classes to other Air Force social media people. And one of my examples that I always start with is like, if you go to Disneyland, just notice how many people at like the hot second they walk in the door or walk through the gate, that there's this feeling that they get. There's a feeling that they have, and they just want to capture that feeling. And it's because it's a very warm, like special, like, oh, this is such a great experience. My family's here together at Disney. And so they're like, gather up a bit. Let's take a picture. Let's take a picture of this moment. And I'm watching, like, the person that's taking the picture, I can tell what he's going to get. He's going to get a picture of his wife and kids and the Disneyland trash can.
Yeah.
Right. And the castle is right here. just go this way, and just get some perspective of where you are. But he has the feeling that he wants to capture. But he doesn't know how to connect the dots between, okay, now how do I grab the real picture of what this place is? And so I've always had that ability. I used cheap cameras for a long time, and then I finally a number of years ago bought the kind of entry-level stuff on my own, and that's when I started just going to band concerts. And the PA director at the time, he was like, "You're giving me better, photographs than the Air Force PA office." And he's like, "I want you to come over to my office, and I'm going to buy you some professional camera gear." And so that's when it just completely took off, because I just when you're passionate about something, that makes it easy to really dig into and to just learn. It's kind of the way we all did with our instruments when we first picked it up. So I just nerded out on the professional level gear and learned the ins and outs of it and how to control all the parameters. So that's kind of how my photography side evolved, and I've been passionate about it ever since.
Oh, that's very cool. That's very cool. Well, speaking of gear, we're going to switch gears and go to our Gear Up. Man, see how that's all flowing together? Our Gear Up section. So that's our section where we actually talk trumpet gear, because, we're all gearheads, and, I get way too many too much negative feedback when I don't talk gear. So we have to do it. So, Kevin, how about sharing with us what you are currently playing, and then we're going to talk about some of the specifics of why you choose that gear.
Well, it's interesting over the COVID period, and I'm not surprised that I did this, because during COVID, I haven't been playing with anybody. I've just been playing to myself, except for these little video projects where we're kind of recorded, separately or very distanced, and we haven't had as many rehearsals and stuff in close proximity. And I've missed that. I've missed that feeling. But when I've had a year of just playing to myself, I've kind of reverted back to some old equipment, and I know I'll change it back when I get back in the band. But I appreciate what you said in the beginning about my sound, because that's really what drives my playing. Purely is my sound. And so when I'm playing by myself, I just want to get as beautiful sound as I can, just a beautiful, warm sound, because I think that's the most important thing to me. Always has been, and I know I'm not unique to that, but I've always been sound driven, not like note driven or technique driven. It's just sound driven. And so I have a horn that is really flexible on the sound side, and it's not terribly unique. It's been around for a long time. It's an old Yamaha 6310Z Bobby Shoe model. I had it since I first got in the Air Force. And Paul Stevens, who was way more of a gearhead than me. He would switch equipment all the time, but I would generally like to find something that I liked and I would just hang on to it forever. But there was a moment where we both got the 6310Zs together, and we actually had Bobby Shoe tweak them. He actually played them, kind of did his thing. I don't know what he does, but he turns a kind of a product, a assembly line model, and just makes it the way it should be. Exactly. He does his thing. And, it might be a little tweak here, a little opening here, do whatever. He plays it the way it was meant for him, which means it's spot on. And I have loved it because it has the kind of qualities that you would think makes a good horn for Bobby Shoe, because he's one of the most versatile players in the universe. He's this brilliant jazz player that can get this really nice warm sound, or he's this just shredding lead player that just can just rip the house down with where these notes come from. How did you play this beautiful low melody and then just tear the roof off of the end of this chart with these crazy lead lines? And so it took me a little bit just to get used to it, because I was always just a blow and go kind of player when I was in my youth. And but I realized that his style of horn is a good match for me, because I love being able to have a horn. It has that kind of wide personality where you can back down on it and it plays really warm and kind of just kind of super pleasant, gorgeous. Or you can lean on it and get and make it zip when you need to play some lead stuff. And so most of my playing in the COVID period on myself is just playing and just playing beautiful melodies, just playing lines, just getting to the rudimentary love of the instrument. So I've been playing that a lot this year. I will tell you that I'll probably, when I get back into the band, I'll go back to what I've been playing for a number of years since I got an Airmen of Note. Most of my career, I probably played that 6310Z, and I did when I first got into Note. And then I switched because, and this is part of that relationship thing with Brian. Like, not only playing, rehearsing, but we're going on tour together. We're hanging out, we're having dinner, we're having lunch, we're having drinks. We're we're just friends, and we talk trumpet, and we talk about what this or that, And so you kind of get really deep into a player's head like that in terms of his whole approach to the instrument. And I started listening to how the reason why he played what he played. And he plays an old Con 36. And so I started keeping my eye out for just that old Con, just to see what it would feel like. And I discovered that I wasn't very in tune with the 36 or the 38, but one day I got a hold of an 8B. If you hold it up side by side, it looks the same shape and design as a 36. But the 36 is nickel plated and the 8B is either lacquered or silver plated. And there may be some other changes, but they look like they'd have the old, like kind of wide wrap. They look almost like the same horn, the same bell size. It's kind of small. But it had that old Con sound. There's something about that old Con sound. I don't know if it's the metal they used back then, the design factor, whatever, but in a big band, it particularly works well. If I were a studio player, I probably wouldn't be my horn because it's too specific. It's like this one core, like it's just like hits you in the chest. It's like this core to it. And that's what Brian sounds like. He's so efficient. He doesn't even look like he's working.
Yeah.
If you get in front of him, you just feel this punch. And when I found that 8B, I was like, suddenly I felt like we were just like dialed in together, just like boom. Okay, that's like I have to get this horn. It just sounds too good with Brian. And I was like, even at the expense of this may or may not be what I would play just by myself, but it sounds so good in the band that I'm gonna get this horn. And that was really when the music directors just couldn't tell who was playing lead. And it was a really good and mature choice on my part to just say what is going to sound the best in the band to support this amazing lead player. And so I've really gotten used to it. And I love it. It just has a great sound. So that's been my horn. I've had a couple of versions of it. I played a lacquer one for a while, and then I found actually I don't want to throw Brian under the bus, but he accidentally damaged my first lacquered 8B. We were just talking in rehearsal, and he flipped around and knocked my horn into the trombone section, and it came up with a lead pipe looked like that. And so he was like, "Oh man, I'm so sorry," and he paid to get it fixed, but it just never played the same after that. But I kept looking out for another 8B, and I found one, but it was silver plate, but it felt basically the same.
Mm-hmm.
So it was that nice sound. So that's my horn. It's an 8B. It's an old Con. And that's the reason why I play it. Sometimes you just, in this setting where you just get this opportunity to play in the same group every day, you just get to the point where you dial it in so finely. And getting that horn was like that next step of just making the perfect match for Brian's lead approach. And so my mouthpiece, I played when I first picked up my first horn. It was a birthday gift in 6th grade. My uncle was a trombone player. He picked out a mouthpiece for me, and it was a Bach 3C. And so that's the mouthpiece that I learned on, and that's the mouthpiece that I played until I was a junior in college. So I had a long time playing solely on that mouthpiece, and I was a lead player on that mouthpiece. But then I started getting work and having experiences and next level stuff to where I just was, and then just meeting more kind of, musicians and lead players, and I was like, I'm going to do a little bit of exploring. And so I started trying to find mouthpieces that were made it a little more comfortable. But I always held to that 3 rim because I was too locked in. I couldn't change. I tried going smaller just to see if I could do it, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't figure out how to do it because I was just so locked into that 3 rim size. But I basically, right now I play. It's basically a Stork LTV6. which either that or I have a custom copy by a friend of mine, Kevin Delaney, who's tried a mouthpiece company for a little while. Then he decided to not worry about it. He's an incredibly successful businessman up in Boston and a fantastic trumpet player. So it was fun to kind of explore custom mouthpieces. But I had a custom mouthpiece through him that I played for, that I still have. That's basically a copy of that Stork LTV6 with minor adjustments. But I've even played a lot on that LTV6 now. And basically it's because it's a 3-rim. It feels almost the same, but it's shallower. And I don't know if it's just the way I play or if I have like fleshy whips or whatever, but I liked an immediate like drop into the mouthpiece, not like an immediate curve like this, but when it drops immediately so that my lips would have room to buzz. And then I could articulate well on it. So it drops immediately and then it gets shallower. So it's shallower than the 3C, but it makes me feel like I can get at least a reasonable sound. Again, if I had my ideal sound, I would probably even go deeper. It would sacrifice the comfort of the upper range, but I just like having a big sound. And I think if there's anything that it always makes me feel good when somebody compliments my sound, because that's the most important thing to me. And I've gotten more compliments on my sound than anything else. And you know, when somebody like Wayne Bergeron comes up to you after a concert and says, "Kevin, man, you have such a big effing sound," I'm like, that makes you feel so good. Like I'm like, I will never forget that. I thank Wayne. He's a friend, but that confirms that because that's the most important thing to me is just a beautiful sound. And I think I turned on to that idea early when I was a young trumpet player, because my grandfather told me he wasn't a musician. He had like a dead ear, you know, like he was one of those guys. Loved to sing, but he just had a dead ear, and he loved to listen to music. But his main compliment to me, he after I played a concert, I played a feature, he was just like, "You really have a beautiful sound." And I was a young player, and I was like, "Oh, that makes me feel so proud to please my grandfather, who's not a musician, doesn't know a whole lot about but he felt good because of my sound." And that just made me like, okay, that's my thing. I'm gonna go. That's my thing. If that makes people happy, who only know what music makes them feel like.
Right.
He wasn't saying, "Oh, you played so many brilliant notes, or you played so high, or you did this." He was just like, "You had a beautiful sound." And I think that was a very early influence on me to just say, "Oh, that will always make people happy. If they don't understand anything else what you're doing, they will feel the beauty of music, and a big part of that is just the sound production, you know." So that's always been my thing.
All right, very cool. All right, well, we're going to wrap things up this evening with the final segment of the show, which is brought to us by my good friends at Robinson's Remedies, Kenny Robinson, Richard Buckamal. This is the Robinson's Remedy Rapid Fire Round, a series of questions that will go all over the place. Just need your quickest answer, and we'll see how this turns out. I have to get a buzzer. I really do. I need to get a buzzer for this. I can get a trombone player to stand back there and just, do something, make some awful noises.
For me, I'm usually really delayed in these patterns.
All right. Well, let's see how this goes. All right, here we go. First question for Mr. Kevin Burns. Who's the biggest influence on your life that is not a trumpet player?
I would have to say, I would have to give credit to my two boys. They make me so proud. I'm so proud of them, and I find that I want. I'm a pretty relaxed person. I don't even as a musician who's been on stage. I don't feel like I seek attention or people lauding me, but I feel like when my sons, if they're proud of me, that makes me feel as good as anything in the universe. So I just always want to do that for them.
All right, cool. What's your favorite book?
Like I said, I had studied. I actually have a master's in business administration. One of the coolest books that I think about is a biography on Warren Buffett. I was fascinated by him because I got my MBA during the height of like the 80s, like these high rollers that were just abusing the system.
Right.
And then here was this story of Warren Buffett, who had this computer-like mind, who was richer than all of them times 10, and still lived in the same first house that he bought. That just blew my mind. So I just wanted to really find out what he was all about, and I was also at the time very interested in just kind of discovering investment principles in my studies, and so that's one of the most fascinating figures I've ever researched.
Yeah, he's an amazing, amazing person. All right. What's the worst movie you've ever seen?
Oh, that's pretty easy. Have you ever seen the movie Human Centipede?
I have not. I've only seen the trailers for it, but that was more than enough for me to go,
Oh my God. Somebody talked me into watching that. That is the most disturbing thing I've ever seen. I mean, there's a handful of scenes that just like are just disturbing.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the movie is just so bad. It's so bad. But that's definitely top of my list.
Yeah. Okay. If you weren't a trumpet player, what would you want to be?
Another good one for me. I discovered about 15 years ago that I would totally drop the trumpet if I could be an Air Force fighter pilot. I got to ride one afternoon. Brian experienced this with me. There were a handful of us that were offered what they call an incentive ride when we played for a base out in New Mexico. And so we rode. Every one of us rode with a real fighter pilot on a two-seater fighter jet for an hour. Like we just like weaving in and out of the New Mexico mountains. It was like Star Wars, and we just going supersonic, and we were like, I threw up twice. It was insane. Like I had bags. I was like, oh! And then because they said if you can feel like it, just do it. You'll feel better. And Brian has this same story. It's funny to talk about it, but. That was such an incredible experience, unlike any sensation I've ever had in my life, and just the raw power of that machine, and the experience of doing that like routinely would be worth giving up. Even something that I love is like the trumpet. It was amazing.
All right. What would your call name be?
It would probably be K-Rod, which is of course my first initial and the part of my middle name. Because I don't know why. Because if I'm playing video games, I usually put that on the screen.
All right.
Video games was a nice pastime on some of our Airmen of Note tours. We were in some town, little town, playing for a wonderful community, but there wasn't much around the hotel. We would just pile in a room and just play video games after the concert. So
yeah,
that became one of my things.
one of those ways to pass the time. All really? Right. What's your favorite drink?
Oh, I love exploring drinks, but I'm always up for a really good margarita.
Frozen or not?
Good question. I usually will go to on the rocks, just because I can usually get the bartender to make a higher top shelf version than just what's mixed in behind the counter.
Yeah. I actually prefer no rocks. Just
all right, kind of room temp.
That's it. I like it that way. And actually, I tend to, people tell me I'm crazy for doing this. When I make margaritas, I prefer using something like an añejo. I will go with that over a Blanco. I will at least do a Reposado, but I've been known to make them with añejos, and I've actually been making them with super añejos, which was really stupid of
Oh
me.
wow.
But I just
Oh,
like the complexity when you use an añejo and you get some of the different colors that you get out of the extra aging. So
nice. We need to have a margarita hang. Sounds like.
absolutely, absolutely, we'll bring your best recipe. I make a killer pineapple jalapeno
Get out of
margarita.
here. You are not going to believe this, but I was about to say that. I there was I got a recipe and I refined it. And for a while I thought I have made the perfect drink. It is a pineapple jalapeno margarita.
There you go, man.
I obsessed over those for a while.
Oh, it's so so was
So
I.
I want to taste yours.
Okay, well, once we get through this COVID crap, then we'll have a margarita hang for sure.
Awesome.
I get down to DC somewhat regularly now. My eldest stepdaughter lives down there, and so we make the journey every once in a while. So we'll have to coordinate on that one for sure.
Cool.
All right. Now I would normally say this is a dinner party. Maybe this is going to be a margarita party. You could have a dinner party, invite any three living people. Any three living people in the world, anybody in the world can come to this party. Three people, who would they be?
I think it would definitely be Warren Buffett. So obviously, he was talked about his book. Um, I'm glad you mentioned Jerry Hay before. I would love to have a hang in person with Jerry Hay. He's one of my few trumpet heroes from my very formative years that I haven't got to meet in person yet. One of the amazing things about this job is that I've gotten to perform with and hang with just about every other significant trumpet player that I grew up with and that affected my personal play. But he's like the last holdout. I would love to hang with Jerry Hay. I'm gonna pull Stevie Wonder out of that
Oh man, okay.
because I actually got to meet him. Me and my wife he came to Blues Alley, which is was a very tiny jazz club in DC. To I was doing a gig and one of the guys was just a world class harmonica player. And he was a good friend of Stevie, and Stevie was doing a concert at the huge arena downtown. But he came out to see this little show for his friend. So I got to meet him, but I need to hang with him again because I didn't get a good picture of him. And it's a funny story because he's like the nicest guy, but his manager was like the meanest person I've ever met. And so I was talking with Steve. I was like, "Sir, it's such a pleasure to meet you. Love all your stuff. Do you mind if me and my wife get a picture with you?" I was like, "Oh yes, of course, love to." And so I got next to him, and I was me and him. My wife was going to take the picture, and just before she clicked the thing, his manager put his hand over my wife's phone. And so my picture with Stevie Wonder looks like this.
Nice.
So I need to recreate that. And he was such a gentleman, such a sweet person. He would be a great hang.
Yeah. Stevie's one of those guys that just is a constant inspiration to me. All through his career. All right, so you've got 3 additional seats at this dinner party, and you can invite 3 additional people, but they need to be people from history, so people that are no longer with us.
I would probably, for starters, I would pick the grandparent that I had the least amount of time with on the start. He was my father's father, my granddad, because he passed away when I was still adolescent, early teen. So I missed a lot of time with him that I got to spend with my other grandparents who fortunately stayed a long time with us. And he was such a character, and he taught me how to fish, and he was just a fun person to be around. I've always thought, from a trumpet playing standpoint, I would love to hang with Conrad Gosler, just to hear stories, and just to pick his brain. Like you kind of alluded to it earlier. Like some of the best lessons you can ever have is just hanging with a musician that you respect. And I would just like to know what was in his head, like how he approached the horn. Because there were so many, I didn't realize this till later in my life, let's say late 20s, that most of these older recordings that I just went crazy over, almost all of them are Conrad Gosling, just these old studio recordings. It could be Frank Sinatra, it could be this artist or this band or whatever. And the lead player was just a fat sound, just swung so hard, just perfection. And inevitably, it would end up being Conrad Gosling.
Yeah.
That's when I started kind of my fascination with him. Of course, unfortunately, he died very young. But just to be in somebody's head like that as a professional would be a really cool experience. Number three, let's go way back in history, like Thomas Jefferson, like the founding father who wrote so much. And in one hand, I would be such an awe of this person, but the other hand, I would have to ask him. I'd be like, how could you write there, all men are created equal, and then allow slander, allow this travesty to be at the front end of our democracy? Like,
Yeah.
just tell me about this. This is a brilliant mind. Just tell me about this. And like, I would just love to have a conversation, just like, well, this is what happened as a result of these decisions that you make. You know, there's something that most of my life I was taught to completely revere, the founding fathers, and then I started wrapping my head around the fact that they let these things slip through that were such a travesty. And I was like, I just want to ask one of them why, why?
Yeah.
As smart as you were, why did you let this happen?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, that would be a very interesting conversation, I'm sure. All right. Next question. Lacquer plated or raw?
I have fallen in love with silver plated and lacquered horns, but I probably would pick lacquer just because the horn that I do have, I think it's a design choice, but it has the sound that I love. So that I remember that transition from going from like as a young player in high school or early college thinking, well, you got to have the silver because it's just so much more valuable than lacquer. And then I transitioned to the place where like, but lacquer is like, can be exactly the sound that you need, that you want. And that gives you the flexibility of this or that. Then you take away just a little bit of that zip and you're deep into the beauty of the sound that you're looking for. Yeah. So each has their role. If I had to pick, it would be lacquer.
Okay. I like raw because I don't have to worry about keeping it clean. So what's your favorite quote?
It wasn't that long ago, actually, that I discovered a quote from Winston Churchill. And I love a good double meaning, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this double meaning, he didn't intend at all to be the way that I take it or the trumpet players would take it, but it's a really good quote for trumpet players too. And it's something like your day will go the way the corners of your mouth turn. And what he's saying is, smile, be positive.
Right.
But the same goes for trumpet players, and just like, if this is working correctly, your day's going to go well. If this is not working correctly, you're not going to have a good day. So I love double meanings, and so I kind of latched onto that when I discovered it. I first saw it on a nondescript like meme, and I started typing in. I wanted to know who said it, and I was like kind of excited that it was somebody as notable as Winston Churchill, because it had that gave it some like prominence, but I love that double meaning for trumpet players.
I think you need to make a meme, make a T-shirt with a nice embouchure on there.
Yeah, with him with a horn in his hand. So,
Yeah, instead of a cigar, give him an 8B. What is your greatest fear?
my greatest fear would be that harm would come to any of my loved ones, my kids, my wife, anybody that, or even my friends. Just that they would, experience harm or even worse, death ahead of me. Just witnessing that, is my greatest fear.
Okay. You could be granted one superpower. What would it be?
If you ask me that as a kid, I would definitely say flying. If you, as an adult, I think time travel would be an amazing thing. I don't rewatch a lot of movies, but for some reason I can always rewatch the movie About Time.
Mm-hmm.
You seen that?
Yeah.
It's really kind of a low key movie, but it's kind of fascinating about exploring what could happen if you had the ability to just organically go back in time at any moment. And it's a lot of fun. Okay. I think I would use it to really bolster my investments. I always think, and this must be from my business school days. Oh man, I should have bought that stock like 10 years ago. That kind of stuff always,
Yeah, if you bought Apple, Tesla, Facebook.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you don't need to. Yeah, not like Back to the Future. Not betting on baseball games or anything like that. Let's do stocks. All right.
Did hear. I will say this. I did have my mind blown recently because I finally heard somebody talking about time travel, and I was like, wow, nobody has ever addressed this piece of it. And this was this woman. She was saying, if you're able to go back, if you're able to have control over time travel, you also need to have control over space travel and like where you're at. He said, because the Earth is traveling around the sun at 17,000 miles an hour. If you just even go back 5 minutes, you're in just deep space.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, that's a really fascinating point.
That is a good point. Yeah, you'd have to have pinpoint accuracy with that one. All right. What aspect of trumpet playing do you feel is the most overrated?
I mean, it would be just the whole high, loud, fast thing. That's kind of three things, but you always hear it in those three things. It's the most exciting thing. It's like the most visceral that you first kind of get into when you're picking up the horn and trying to learn it. But that's, ultimately that's not where the music is, and that's not even where the money is, as a pro.
Yeah. What aspect of trumpet playing do you feel is the most underrated?
I mean, going along with that, and I kind of referred to it before, is just being able to play a beautiful melody, like with the phrasing of a vocalist that just warms a person's soul. The trumpet is capable of doing that. It's not all just flash and fanfare and like piercing high notes. The beauty of the instrument that really reaches people is that being able to find a melody. That's an intuitive piece. That's also like a gift, I think, that I've found. And not even every musician has the ability. Some musicians are so into the technical side that they lose the ability to just pick up the instrument, think of a tune in their head, and just play it. Just play it from their ear with just a beautiful phrasing that just makes you happy.
Yeah.
That is not paid enough attention to by young players.
Okay. All right. Speaking of your superpower, you have the ability to go back in time, and you want to give yourself one piece of advice about music. What would it be?
And I should also learn to play the bass. I would have less hernias and less headaches.
And more gigs, probably.
More gigs. Not abandon trumpet, but just
Yeah. Just in addition.
That's a good backup for any musician. Just learn the bass.
Play the bass. Yeah. Okay, well, what advice would you give your younger self about life?
I'll go to something that I probably expressed to my sons more than anything, and now they're 20 and 22, almost 23. It's an ancient saying. Heard it all my life. Didn't really click to me till I was older. I mean, I think it goes back to ancient Greece. It's just simply know thyself. Know who you are before you make any decision. Just dig deep on who you are. Particularly comes in handy with relationships, but with any kind of decision, you got to know who you are. Yeah. Because any long-term commitment, because you're always going to end up at where you are. So you can't fake a decision through trying to be somebody that you're not. So know who you are and be that person.
Yeah, that's great advice. All right, and our final question: what do you want your legacy to be?
This is like what people think of you after you're gone, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think that if I'm recognized for some modicum of success in this business, this music or trumpet business and military band business, I want that to be preceded by the fact that I made that journey by being kind and respectful to everybody that I came across.
Yeah. Well, that is a good way to live life. I think if we all adopted that things would be a lot different. We could actually sit down and talk with each other like we've been doing for a while, and sharing and just learning to connect to the points that we share in common, as opposed to focusing on the areas that we're different. So I want to thank you so much, Kevin, for sharing your experience, your insights, and it's been really great. And I wish you nothing but the best of luck with things as you go forward into the post-COVID world. And I hope that the Airmen continue to produce some fantastic stuff. I mean, it is a great band, and if anybody has not seen the Airmen perform, you need to do it, because the recordings are great, but there's nothing like being in the audience and just not only hearing the sound, but the synergy, as Kevin was talking about, the connection, not just between Kevin and Brian, but that band functions like one individual working together. So it's certainly worth it. So please check out the Airmen and all the other military bands. They're all doing a fantastic job. So once again, Kevin, thank you very much, my friend. And let's try and get that margarita hang on the books.
Definitely, Jose. I'm looking forward to that as soon as possible.
All right, sounds good. And for those of you joining us on the Trumpet Gurus Hang, as always, remember, peace and slide grease. We're out. Hey, thank you so much for hanging with us today. This podcast is all about creating connection through our mutual love for the trumpet life. I hope that you learned a few things about today's guest and had some laughs along the way. Don't forget to give us a review. We love those 5-star ratings. And please share this podcast with your friends. We want to see our hang grow for show. Have a suggestion for a future topic or a guest? Hit me up at thetrumpetgurus@gmail.com. Our opening theme was written and performed by Lexi Signor, and all other music comes courtesy of The Greatest Funeral Ever. So in the words of W.C. Handy, life is like a trumpet. If you don't put anything into it, you don't get anything out. So go out there and let your trumpet sound. And I'll see you at the next hang.